I bought an Elegoo Centauri Carbon, and I'm going to talk about it. So the background, I've got an old 3D printer. It's an Ultimaker UM3E, and it's dated. It's old technology. But the whole time I've had it, it's never really had the best print quality. Always had a lot of print failures. Again, it's slow. It has a small build area, and it does have like dual hot ends, but that actually ends up causing a lot of problems because it's really finicky the way they've got to be set, and it throws weird errors. It's just been a hassle. So I've been looking and wanting to get a different 3D printer for quite some time now. But nobody really makes the 3D printer that I want. And that put me in kind of a dilemma because do I just keep waiting for eventually the magic 3D printer that I want to become available, or do I just go ahead and get in? But I don't want to pay $800, $1,000, $1,500 on a 3D printer that doesn't really do everything that I want. And so that kind of, again, left me in a pickle what to do. So I spent the $300 and I got an Elegoo. And the reason is because I figure this can maybe just tide me over until I really get what I want. Now, throughout this, let me remind you that I am not a 3D printing channel. This is not what I do. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to have nitpicks with the review that I didn't do this or that, I didn't show you this or that. There are a lot of reviews on this machine out there. And if you want to look at a lot of the details for this or that, there's a lot of people doing that. This is feedback from a real person who spent their own money. I have no affiliation with Elegoo. They didn't send me jack crap. They don't know who I am, right? This is just, I bought this thing. Here's my experience with it. So keep that in mind throughout this, that I am not a pro at doing reviews of 3D printers. I don't want to be, right? That looks like a boring job to me. But I can tell you about this one because that's what I've got. So the Elegoo Centauri Carbon is a pretty standard modern printer, meaning it's more of a Bamboo clone, really. It's got a standard print volume, it's Corexy, it's pretty fast, it's enclosed. Its main advantage is that it's dirt cheap. Now, it doesn't have all of the high-end stuff. It doesn't have a heated chamber. It doesn't have multi-material support yet. It doesn't have quick change nozzles. It's not packed, but it's a pretty good base setup, and I think for the money, it's turned out to be a really good deal because I do think it's going to serve as a good placeholder for me until something better really does come out that blows my mind. So getting it set up was really easy. Just take it out of the box, you clip some zip ties, and you're kind of off and running. There's a built-in canned set of routines that does all the calibration. So it does like automatic bed leveling, it does PID tuning, it does vibration compensation. And so all that stuff, you just kind of run it. So I've been using Orca Slicer with this, and that's one of the things that I do like about this printer is you're not actually forced to use their slicer. Their stuff isn't that locked down. I've been able to access this printer over my local network. I haven't actually touched their app at all. I updated the firmware on the printer as soon as I got it via USB. I just downloaded it to USB, put the USB in the printer, and it just updates the firmware. So I've never had to set up an account with them. They've never accessed the printer. They've never accessed my network. I've got it sitting on an isolated VLAN locally, and that's how I use it. So that's been really nice that I haven't been forced to set up yet another account to do something with the cloud because I can access stuff on my own home network. It does have a built-in camera. They've improved the lighting, I guess. The very first ones that came out didn't have great lighting. This one does okay. I wouldn't say it's the best lighting in the world, but it's fine. You know, same thing with the camera. It's not 4K, 120 FPS by any stretch. It's functional and it works. So far, the basic experience, again, stock PLA settings, because I mentioned they're not that locked down. Elegoo has provided a lot of print profiles for this machine into Orca Slicer. They're there by default. And so just using the stock stuff seems to work pretty well, especially with the stock 0.4mm nozzle and PLA. The user interface, I guess, has become fairly standard. So I guess, I say I guess because I don't have a Bamboo Lab, but from what I understand, it's very similar to the Bamboo Lab setup. And that's what a lot of printers are going with. My real complaints is that the screen is not huge, which is fine. I don't need a big screen, but the touch interface sometimes requires pretty precise finger placement on the screen. And since it's kind of low on the machine and the areas can be quite small, I find that a little finicky. So basically, I feel like the UI could be improved a little bit, but it works just fine. The feeding and extrusion has all been fine. I haven't had any clogs yet. The bed leveling is really slow, and that's one thing I've seen other people complain about. And yeah, the bed leveling, they really need to figure out how to speed that thing up, but it does work. So I did a first layer test, and pretty good. I mean, you can see some light through it in some areas, but I mean, the whole thing peeled off in one clean layer. So I don't know how much better a person should really expect things to be there. What else can I tell you about? You know, you can turn on linear advance. I calibrated that. And so it's got all the modern kind of printing stuff built in that it can do. And, you know, structurally, it's pretty solid. Again, it prints well right out of the box. It's set up pretty well out of the box. It feels solid right out of the box. They do include a little bit of filament out of the gate, but like I couldn't even get through like a whole print before I got to test the filament runout sensor, and it does have one and it does work. It will stop. You put in more filament, it picks back up, and it does just fine. The first real print that I made was this little catcher for the filament poops, because it does poop, and I don't want to be fingering this thing's bunghole trying to get stuff out of there. So this is included on the USB drive that they give you, so I printed that out. It printed out just fine. And I guess it's as good a time as any to start talking about the print quality. And here is a typical print off of my Ultimaker. And this is a 0.4mm nozzle. This is printed in PLA. And I even did some ironing on the top with this one. But if you start looking close at this, you can see how kind of rough and poorly stacked the layers are. I mean, look at the seam on this thing. And, you know, the circular portions are always kind of rough on my machine. You can see weird textures kind of on the outside because it's not super consistent in its extrusion. And so that's kind of what I've come to expect. There's, you know, some blobs and all kinds of things. And I've tuned the crap out of that thing. It just doesn't do any better. Well, this is the very first print off the Elegoo. Now, look, it's a pre-sliced model that came on the USB, so it's going to be extremely well tuned, but it's just so much smoother. The layers are stacked so much nicer. I did tons of torture tests and stuff, and I mean, you can just see, I mean, the finish on these things, really high performance on the retraction tests. It bridges pretty decently. The cooling's pretty sufficient. The tolerance stuff all just pops right out on this thing. It measures pretty well. You know, you can see the overhang test imperfect, and I'm not going to go into like super high depth on print quality on this simply because, look, there's a lot of reviews of this thing out here. You can look at people that are far more experienced than me on that, but I'm just going to point out, look, it's been pretty good. It's a lot better than my old printer. And for 300 bucks, I don't think I can complain about this. And just so we're clear, when I say I've done a lot of tests, I mean, I've done a lot of tests, right? I've got lots and lots of, you know, I did the temperature towers, I did the full Orca slicer thing to make sure, and it just turns out that it just didn't matter that much. The thing just prints pretty good out of the box using the default Elegoo print profiles. So I'm not going to go on and on showing you a bunch of test stuff, because again, there's a lot of people out there testing these things. I wanted to know for my own purposes, is this going to work for me? And the first real print out of the box, beyond just, you know, getting the poop chute set up there, was printing some ASA, because I tend to print mostly in PLA or ASA. And the reason I like ASA is because it does a little bit better outside. So if I'm printing something that's going to be outside, I typically will use a Polymaker white ASA. And I had a pretty good opportunity to put it to use, because lately I've had this gutter that dumps water right on some flower bed, and it's been eroding next to my patio. And so I figured, you know what, I will make an extension so that it funnels the water off over the concrete. That way it'll stop that erosion. And so I modeled this up in FreeCAD and I printed it out, and here is the print in ASA. Now from a distance, it probably looks fine. But I printed it flat on the bed, and that led to some cracks, some layer splitting. If you've not printed an ASA, it contracts. It shrinks pretty bad. And it doesn't have the world's best layer adhesion, and so it is prone to cracking on the layer lines. Now, the Elegoo Centauri does not have a heated chamber. It will get warm, and I think I've checked it, and it gets into the high 30s Celsius inside the thing if you keep it enclosed, keep the bed on. But when I printed this, I used all the default settings, and it shrank a little bit, and so I got some splits at some layer lines. But that's okay, because it turns out that I didn't measure correctly when I modeled this thing. I measured the actual gutter itself, and I didn't pay attention that the opening is actually flared a bit. And so I actually had to make a slightly bigger version, and I printed that one vertically like this. That way it wouldn't need any support at all. And it changed where the layer lines would be in the model. So print orientation matters quite a bit when you're dealing with these kind of problems in 3D printing. That one printed perfectly, so it's outside doing its job because I installed it, but it didn't have any of these problems. The other things that I adjusted were that I turned the fan down because the stock profile had some fan on. And again, that can influence some of the shrinking as you print. So turn the fan down, reoriented the print, and again, printed it vertically, used up almost the entire height, the entire Z-axis of the printer to do that thing, and it did a pretty good job. So I really feel pretty good about printing ASA. It looks like it's going to be up to me to design things well and to print them in the right orientation, but it certainly seems to be able and capable of printing ASA pretty well, which, look, that's not the highest end test. So let's move on and let's check some more difficult things, because even though I mostly print with PLA, and PLA prints fine, and even though I mostly, if I'm not printing PLA, print with ASA, and it seems to print ASA fine, what about other filaments that I don't use as much but might be handy and some people might be interested in? All right, so I've got some octopuses, some octopi, I guess, printed out here in various types of filament. I don't like benchies. Everybody does benchies, and I know they're a standard for a reason, but I don't really care. So let's look at some different filaments. Now, the first alternate filament was PETG, and so I tried a PETG print, and not surprisingly, it turned out great. Zero problems whatsoever with PETG. Let's not even talk about that, because PETG isn't really that tough anyway. Other stuff I tried, well, I had some TPU, and I tried to print it, and I had some problems with the TPU. This is a really soft TPU, and it split. It didn't have good layer adhesion. However, this filament is over 5 years old. I've had this for a long time because, like I said, I don't use TPU, and I felt like that was a bad test. So I got some new TPU, and this is the Elegoo TPU. It's actually, I think they're fast TPU. Excuse me, it's not fast TPU, it's rapid TPU 95A. That was the again, I went with the Elegoo version just to give them the fair shot. Look, this is the stuff that they have that they probably design with this type of filament in mind, so that's what I went with. And it printed out pretty great, right? I don't really have any problems. You can see there's some stringing right at the bed level on this thing, but otherwise it's really clean. You know, it's pretty soft, but not crazy soft. And yeah, it printed out great. So no real issues with that. By the way, do be careful when you print TPU on PEI. I had some residue left over after the yellow stuff that I really had a booger getting that off. So this one I printed with some glue stick under it. So TPU, it seems to be capable pretty well of doing some TPU. Next up, nylon. So I have some Tallman 910 nylon that I've had. Now this is old. I did dry it really thoroughly overnight in a dehydrator. And it mostly did pretty good with the nylon. There were some issues at the top, and I think that's probably just up to me to figure out some slicing parameters. It may be temperature or layer time or something. You can see those kind of print defects right up here at the front. But now, if you look at the bottom and the other areas, the arms and stuff on this nylon, they printed really, really well. And this isn't a filled nylon. This is pure nylon, unfilled. So it's very flexible. Yeah, and it did a decent job. I'm confident that with some tuning, it would be able to handle the nylon as well. The last, and this is probably the most difficult filament that I ever try to print in, and I haven't tried to print with it in a long time. So this is polycarbonate. And again, it's not filled, it's not a blend, it's just frickin' polycarbonate, right? I mean, it just breaks. It's very brittle, it's very stiff. It tends to warp like the dickens. It is really hard to print. But it printed pretty well as far as the print quality, but like I said, it shrinks and it warps, and so I did have some layer separation on the back of this thing. So can it print polycarbonate? Well, once again, I did a disservice. This is, again, like 5 or 6 year old filament, and I didn't feel good about showing people that and thinking that was all there was, so I bought some of the Elegoo polycarbonate. Now, I'm not sure if this is pure polycarbonate or a blend, but it is polycarbonate, and you can see at the printing temperature 250 to 270. It is a fairly high temperature. You need to dry it for a long time because it will absorb water. And so here was my print with the Elegoo polycarbonate, and this is a lid holder that you can, remove a couple screws on the side panel and use that to attach these. And these printed great. They actually printed vertically without support. There are a version of these that are included on the USB card, I believe, but those are sliced for PLA. I found these on, I think, Maker World or somewhere, or what's the Printables. I think maybe I got this off of Printables. And it also includes some bed holders here. And so basically this just allows you to take the lid, and the lid just fits in there. And so, like, if you need to print a filament that needs to have the top open because it needs more cooling or something, this is so you don't have to just lay the lid on the side of the table or put it anywhere where it might break. And it does have room so that you can put build plates on here. So if I drop this thing in, it fits pretty tight, but yeah, you can put your spare build plates if you have one, or you can put the lid on that thing. And so that was polycarbonate, and it printed really, really well. The print itself, there's a little bit of ringing going on, but now this is a shiny filament. It's gloss because it's polycarbonate, so it's like a translucent, almost black. So you can see every defect, and they're very minor if you actually feel them, but visually they stand out. Yeah, a lot of ringing kind of showing up. Again, it does have some tuning for that you can do, but it's not too bad. And again, it's more of a visual defect than an actual physical one because you can't even feel that stuff. It's purely because this stuff is so glossy. So where does that leave me overall in this thing? Is it perfect? And the answer is obviously no, it's not perfect. It lacks some of the top-end features that I would love to see. I mean, it's a little smaller than optimal for me because I would optimally like to have like a 300mm cube. Its interface, like I mentioned, is a little finicky. I wish maybe the touch zones would be larger and that they would redo the interface to have a little bit larger and more kind of finger-friendly touch interface because I think it's a little tight. I've noticed some bugs in the web interface, and so if you go in and it runs basically a version of Klipper, and you look at the web interface and you try to turn like the light on remotely, that doesn't work, and that's weird. And sometimes it won't update the print layer that you're on. And so there are things that are in the interface that just don't work. And I don't know if that's just the newest version of the firmware, because I've seen people saying that if you downgrade to the prior version of the firmware, that stuff works, and maybe it's just a bug in the new version. But like, that's where it's at, right? I use the new version, and it's got some bugs in that web interface, but for the most part, I haven't encountered that many bugs. It looks like they've revised the design of the Centauri Carbon over time to take in some early feedback. So one of the things on mine is, if you notice, like the filament feed tube is not in the drag chain for the tool head, right? So that's something that I think in the early ones there's kind of a hard kink, and that was causing some problems. Well, they've changed that. They have improved the lighting a little bit compared to the early versions where people were saying, yeah, the light is kind of worthless. So they've done some moderate changes over time to kind of improve it through the production, and I've got a fairly new one because I just ordered it myself. Again, it's not going to have every high-end feature, but for $300, I don't know how you could possibly beat this thing. I think it's basically this generation of 3D printers kind of Ender, right? The Creality Ender was historically, if you wanted a cheap printer, you got an Ender, right? Ender clone or something like that. Well, this one seems to be, to me, the cheap but pretty good bamboo clone. It works really well. The print quality is pretty high. If you're mostly printing in PLA ABS, man, it does a great job. Now, if you really want to go and print really high-end stuff like polypropylene, it doesn't get hot enough for that. I haven't tested filled filaments because I don't like filled filaments. It does seem to do a decent enough job with things like, you know, the polycarbonate, and again, maybe that's a poly blend. It can probably print nylon too. But there are going to be some trade-offs. It's still very, very cheap. You know, the feature set's decent. Swapping out nozzles requires you to swap out the entire hot end, which I would prefer that to be more of a quick swap. But you do have to take out a couple screws, pull a couple plugs, put the other one in, then you're going to have to redo all your bed leveling and PID tuning because it's a different heater and all that other stuff. But that's just part of it. So that takes a little longer than I would like. The bed leveling is way too slow. You know, overall, I've had a pretty positive experience, and it is hard to complain for $300. And I think, you know, if I get a couple years out of this thing and then somebody makes my dream 3D printer and I need to spend $1,000 or $1,500 on that, I think I can live with that. I think I can live with this thing for a couple years if it's durable. I can't tell you durability because I haven't had it long enough, but it seems to work pretty well. So, you know, the Elegoo Centauri Carbon does have a very compelling feature set at its price point. I don't know how you can beat it. The double-sided build plate's really good. Like, I have had great bed adhesion. I have not had a pure print failure out of this machine yet. I haven't had anything come unstuck from the bed. I haven't had anything spaghetti. You know, I've had a couple of issues with some filaments that shrink a lot, but I mean, you're going to have that on a lot of printers unless they have a heated build chamber. And, you know, fixing some orientation, fixing some temperatures, and that's probably solvable. It's got, you know, hardened drivetrain, so you can use abrasive filaments if that's what you want to do. Some people may have quibbles about how they do this or that minor thing, but I don't really care. That's just stuff you got to work around. I haven't found any big, oh, this is a deal breaker for me yet. You can use it in an offline environment. Again, I have never had this thing touch the internet. It has never been able to contact outside of my house because they allow you to do that. I ran the full thing locally and it works great. I've never used their software. I've only used Orca, and that's worked just fine. So with that, again, for its price point, it's really fast. The print quality is pretty good. It's capable of printing some higher temperature filaments, and it looks like it's able to do that well. The features are there. You can use it offline, and so I think, yeah, it's a pretty good deal for 300 bucks. And I think that's basically all the opinions I have on the thing. It works pretty well, and I plan on just using it from here on out, and yeah, it is what it is. In the future, maybe I'll get something else, but for now, it looks like I'm going to be running with a cheap knockoff bamboo clone and enjoying myself with it. So if you got any feedback, comments, questions, feel free to leave them down below. I'll try to answer anything I can, but that's been my experience. Thanks.